I have received a warm welcome from Republican leaders and liberal leaders around the city these past few weeks, and I want to thank each and every one of them for helping me make this important decision. New York City has been blessed with leaders that have put progress, reform, and good government before party. Fiorello LaGuardia, John Lindsay, Nelson Rockefeller, Jacob Javits, Mike Bloomberg, Rudy Giuliani, all recognized that good government was more important than ideology or party labels. New York City has embraced fusion candidates in the past, and it will again this coming year. Since the inception of the Liberal Party, no Republican candidate for mayor has ever won without Liberal Party support. Theodore Roosevelt cleaned up New York by telling truth to power and truth to the public. I plan to run a campaign that will talk about the hard truths facing our city and the ideas that I have to fix our growing problems. I will continue the successful policies of the last two liberal Republican mayors, recognizing the destabilizing force of crime in impeding New York City's progress, while at the same time protecting the civil liberties of all New Yorkers. We will also continue to make New York City a leading technology center. We will develop our precious waterfront, and we will develop all 5 boroughs in prosperity in our economic development initiatives. But the progress we've made the past 2 decades is beginning to erode. Crime is up. Poverty is spiking up. And our graduation rates are only up marginally. When I've gone around the city the last few months speaking to people, they tell me they believe New York City is starting to move backwards. We have a troubled economy that is working too slowly for too many New Yorkers. And we have a beleaguered education system that borders on chaos and has dismal outcomes for far too many. New York's one-party dominated political system is now plagued with systemic corruption. The upcoming Democratic mayoral primary campaign will likely be a circus dominated by special interests and career politicians, whom I call the Silent Five, and who seem to care more about their next public sector job than they do about the public good. More than 30 elected leaders in city and state governments have been indicted, censured, or jailed in the past decade. The member item system in the city council and in the state legislature has allowed elected leaders to steal hard-earned tax dollars and funnel them to their families and to their cronies. I will develop a system that will allocate the necessary funding to neighborhood groups around the city with vigilant oversight. I have called the 5 potential Democratic mayoral candidates the Silent Five because for too long our problems have been glossed over and none of them have spoken about them. That might be acceptable if they were just candidates for public office, but 4 of them are current city office holders, and the 5th was a city office holder for 8 years. A candidate for mayor who refuses to pay campaign fines should be treated no differently than a city scofflaw. A candidate for mayor who rewrites the rules of campaign finance so she can stockpile tainted cash from donors who do business with the city should not be allowed. We cannot again allow an elected leader to use public money to advance their campaign. One of my community newspaper colleagues recently called out the council speaker on this, and I urge you to read his powerful column in the Queens Tribune. We need a mayor who will lead rather than pander, who will not resort to counterproductive ideas like raising taxes on the wealthy, which will simply drive important tax dollars out of New York City. I will offer specific ideas on how to cut our bloated city budget. I will offer ideas on how to raise new revenue streams that are not job-killing tax increases. And I will offer ideas that will allow us to finally bring down property taxes, which have driven rents to sky-high lengths and which threaten to destroy our precious real estate industry. I am here today to assure New Yorkers that they will have a real choice in 2013. I am free to tell the truth, even if it makes current leaders feel uncomfortable or if it is politically unpopular. We are going to run a fusion campaign that makes Theodore Roosevelt proud. As Theodore LaGuardia once said, there is no Republican or Democratic way to clean the streets of New York City. We're at a critical juncture in our city and our state's future. As I said before, poverty is spiking up, crime is rising, and less than half of our students are graduating from high school. And of those that do graduate, only 3/4 are adequately prepared for college. We must solve these corrosive problems. Today, we must finally vow to reverse the growing inequality and the cycle of poverty that threatens our city's future. My immigrant parents came here in the 1950s to make a better life for themselves and for their children. I was the beneficiary of those efforts and of the opportunities that New York City affords all of us. I have lived here my entire life, and I have raised my children here. I believe in New Yorkers, and I believe in the future of the city of New York. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take your questions.
You said crime is creeping back up and that graduation rates are too low and that the economy is not working. How would you then rate Mayor Bloomberg's tenure?
How would I? I'm sorry, what's my?
How would you rate Mayor Bloomberg's tenure as someone that you said you want to?
I think the mayor's first 8 years were successful, and I think the last 2 years, not just because of his efforts, but because of the national efforts, things have gone in the wrong direction. I think the education system hasn't progressed adequately in the last 10 years, and I think we can be doing a lot more. Sorry. I think we can be doing a lot more to help those in need in the city.
Tom, you had said when you first were exploring a bid that you were hopeful that you'd raise, I don't remember the exact number, I think you said about $500,000 and that the money was an important part and that, a lot of your friends and family were all Democrats. How much of this switch is sort of due to sort of a general frustration with the fundraising numbers or with what you've been seeing so far in terms of the Democratic side?
Thank you, President. This has nothing to do with fundraising. This has to do with sort of an evolution of my feelings. I realize that this city needs centrist leadership like it's had for the past 20 years. As I said in my comments, the alternatives offered in the Democratic Party are not pragmatic problem solvers. This is not about party, this is not about ideology, this is about fixing the problems in New York. It's not about campaign fundraising, and it's not about the polls. It's about having a voice and having a leader who can fix this city.
Tom, you started off this campaign by going down to an Occupy Wall Street protest. Is that centrist leadership, or what was that?
That was simply being a good reporter, which I'd like to see more of in the city. I decided that the only way that I can learn what happened down at Occupy Wall Street and what their concerns were was by actually sleeping down there that night. Because as you know, as a reporter, you only know what people are thinking by actually talking to them. And I did that night, and I thought it was a great experience.
How does this affect being the Liberal Party nominee?
This is compatible with being a Liberal Party nominee because the Liberal Party has endorsed mayors in the past like John Lindsay, Michael Bloomberg, Rudy Giuliani, going back to Theodore LaGuardia. So the Liberal Party and the Republican Party are actually very compatible.
Who are you voting for in November for the presidential race?
I'm here to talk about the future of New York, not about national politics.
Are you in the Republican Party in the primary for the long haul? Are you willing to primary John Catsimatidis if the county leaders decide to back in?
I am going to primary anybody who comes on.
You've criticized Quinn and the other Democratic candidates. I'm wondering why now are you making this
pronouncement that they're the Silent Five and somewhat corrupt and self-interested. You've been in.
For those who've been paying attention the last year, I've been critical of Quinn and others repeatedly. I've been critical of de Blasio last week when he announced his ill-fated idea to raise taxes. I wrote a column in the Daily News talking about the tainted cash that Christine Quinn has raised. I had a column in the New York Post 6 months ago about the member item scandal in the city council. This is not something new. I've been critical of Democratic politicians for a long time.
Who was the last Republican you voted for?
Last Republican leader was
That you voted for.
The last Republican you voted for.
Mike Bloomberg.
Do you?
National level?
Don't know. I don't think I have. I haven't. And again, being a New York City Republican is like being a Democrat in every other state.
So what's the significance of this change then?
The significance is that it's a logical step to give New York City voters a choice next year. In a Democratic primary, there'll be a very slim choice of 3 to 5 leaders who are pandering to the left. I'm offering voters a choice in the center.
If you fall short, I mean, do you intend to remain a Republican after 2013, or is there a chance you might switch back, or is this sort of for the long haul? Or
I don't know what I'm having for lunch tomorrow, so I can't really answer that.
You also wear a second hat as a publisher of a newspaper, and you've been very critical, like you just said, of some of the candidates running. Are you going to refuse any of their ads or somehow curtail?
What my company does as a business has nothing to do with my campaign. I've recused myself editorially from my newspapers for the past year since I announced. I will continue to recuse myself editorially from any political process in our newspapers, but the business side should not suffer because I'm running for mayor.
But if they use this tainted money, public or privately funded otherwise, if you saw those ads in your paper, how would you feel about it?
If Christine Quinn wanted to run ads in our papers, I would leave it up to the publisher of the newspapers to decide.
Have you reached the conclusion that you could not beat the Democratic nomination?
I reached a conclusion that the best way for me to get my message out and the best fit for me ideologically is to run as a liberal Republican fusion candidate.
Have you sought endorsements from any elected Republicans or former elected Republicans?
I have not yet. I think it's premature. I just announced today that I'm a member of their party. I have received some very warm notes from each of the Republican Party leaders, which we'll distribute to anybody who wants them. All the county leaders in New York have written notes welcoming me to the party, and I think in the next month they'll decide on which candidate they want to endorse. But I'm very confident they'll endorse me.
And why do you think you're better than, I guess there's at least one other person who is seeking the GOP nomination, McDonald?
George McDonald? Yes. I don't know much about Mr. McDonald. I'm not sure about his views. I'm looking forward to debating him if we run against each other. But I think my background speaks for itself. I've been a businessman for 20 years, 25 years, building a public company and a private company. I've been an educator. I've covered government. So I think I have some unique experience, and I think I have some unique ideas that I think the voters will like.
If Ray Kelly suddenly decides to seek the GOP nomination, do you think you're a better candidate?
You know what? You can't jump in late and expect other people are going to cower. I like Ray Kelly. I think he's a great New Yorker. I would primary him too.
are you sympathetic to?
Police commissioner if you were elected?
Not if he ran against me.
Are you sympathetic to Mr. McDonald's thoughts on perhaps filing a lawsuit over the campaign finance limits?
I don't know the specifics, although I'm planning to take part in campaign finance. I think New York City's campaign finance reform was a very progressive and smart move, and anybody I think who tries to circumvent it will probably incur the wrath of the voters. But I don't know the specifics of Mr. McDonald's lawsuit. I'd be disappointed in him if he did that.
Why do you think the Democratic establishment has moved so far to the left, or has not been as centrist as you say voters deserve?
This has been going on for over 2 decades, Ozzy. I've been covering politics. You know, if you look at Democratic primaries going back to 1993, the voters of the city realized that pragmatic, centrist leadership is the way to run a city like New York. Rudy Giuliani came in 1993. He was outnumbered, 6-1. He won 2 terms. Mike Bloomberg ran in 2001, and there were 4 Democratic candidates who ran in a primary. They all ran to the left, and they lost to Mike Bloomberg. It'll happen again next year.
How many times did you vote for Rudy Giuliani in the general election when he ran for mayor?
I believe I voted for him once. I think we're going back 20 years here. Any other questions?
And have you ever voted for any of the other Democrats who are running for mayor now in other races, like for
I'm
say
not sure.
'09?
The only person that I know who's actually running, who's declared, is Bill Thompson. And I believe I voted for him for controller the 2 times he ran.
And of the others, so I mean, all but running, I guess.
Christine Quinn, I don't live in her district.
Right, no, I understand that.
Bill de
But
Blasio, I don't live in Brooklyn yet.
how about for public
he ran for
advocate?
public
Yeah, did you?
Oh, when he ran for public advocate?
Or for John Liu, or Scott, who ran for obviously Manhattan Borough President. Have you voted
Yeah,
for
it's a
any
very
of them?
good question. I don't know the answer. I think I voted for the Democrats in that election. I'm not even sure there was a Republican candidate in those elections. I've always exercised my right to vote, and if there had been a strong Republican alternative, I probably would have voted for them. But there hasn't been. There will be next year.
Were any of your friends or family surprised when you said, I'm going to register as a Republican?
In the interest of full disclosure, my brother is a staunch Democrat, and I discussed it with him on a couple of occasions, and he now understands fully and he supports me fully. But he's my brother.
If there were Democrats who gave you money while you were running as a Democrat and they were unhappy with your switch, would you return their money?
Of course, yeah, I would. I don't think that's going to happen. The people that have given me money so far, and quite frankly, back to David Chen's question, I've been holding back on fundraising for the past 6 months because I was thinking about this move, and I didn't want to go to people who I was friends with or their friends and ask them for money if I knew I was going to make the switch. So as far as I'm concerned, my fundraising efforts will start in earnest today. Now that this is fully out there. Teddy doing my favorite columnist.
How about traffic safety, Tom?
Traffic safety?
Yeah, really. And bike lawlessness. So many people are so concerned for so long. And the bike lanes are causing a lot of problems. So I'm here for a lot of people who
Sure.
ask you to be here. And the older people would really vote for you. I know that.
Thank you. Traffic safety is a huge issue. I am in favor of bike lanes, but I don't think they've been implemented effectively. I think there has to be a more coordinated effort. I'm actually in favor of potentially putting in elevated bike lanes, which was suggested in the Daily News editorial last week. I think there's better ways to do things, but I am very sympathetic as a parent of young children crossing the streets and walking the streets. I know how difficult, and also I was always concerned about my mother before she passed away walking the streets in New York, so I'm sympathetic to that, and we'll look into that.
Do you expect to be the choice of the Republican establishment when all is said and done?
I hope to be, but even if I'm not, I plan to run no matter what.
Can you specify the balance between protecting civil liberties and security? You mentioned that was one of the key prospects.
I think stop and frisk is, in principle, a good idea. It has to be implemented more fairly. I think one of the problems is that the Operation Impact program that they use, which puts rookie cops in the worst neighborhoods in the city, has led to a spike in stop and frisks. So I talked to Bill Bratton about that, who thinks that is one of the contributing factors to the spikes in stop and frisk. I think we have to go back to community policing, which was also something that David Dinkins and Rudy Giuliani put into place. If police know their neighborhoods and are well known by the people of their neighborhoods, they won't be resorting to stop and frisk so much.
You said you had no recollection of voting for a Republican president in the past. Why not be upfront with voters this time around and tell them who you're supporting?
Because I really don't want to confuse national politics with New York politics. Who I vote for is a private thing. I don't believe this mayor has told the voters who he's voting for, nor do I think I have to at this point. At the right time, I might. The story today is about the future of New York. What happens nationally, I have no impact on. Any other questions? Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Stay tuned.
Thank you.